So, Paul, we have a few more people trying to get into the waiting room there. Steve's managing that for us. I think we're almost there, but just a couple more we're waiting for. So, executive, I think we're ready to go. However, there are a lot of people online at this meeting, and still a couple more trying to get in. For the sake of the record, I can go down the list and identify everybody that's at the meeting. And it does look like all of the EOB members are present at the moment, but I can go down the list and do a roll call real quick if you want.
Yeah, I think you go through the list rather than having everybody do introduction. It takes long time.
Sure. So
maybe you should recognize the board members.
Correct.
And
yes.
then we can start our proceedings.
You bet. So I'll go down the list, executive, and starting at the top with board members, I see in attendance Hall Walker. I see in attendance Bellingham Council member Michael Lilliquist. Commissioner Rob Roy Graham from the Fire Commissioners Association, Mayor Seth Fleetwood, Mayor of Bellingham, also Chief Jerry DeBryan is online there. Actually, I'm sorry, I back up. Go down the list here. That would be Rick Kowski, the citizen representative, then Dr. Rob Rush from the hospital representative, Mayor Cortias, City of Linden Mayor. And that is the EOB present.
Mayor Fleetwood.
Mayor Fleetwood's there. I do not see Rob Roy Graham on here, or did I call his name already? Oh, there he is. I'm sorry, I misspoke. So Commissioner Graham is attending. So we have the full EOB board and present.
Great. Okay. Well, I call to the order of the meeting. Is it for me to do that, right? It's been a while. I forgot that.
Yes.
Maybe I can start that. Okay, I call to the order the meeting of the EMS Oversight Board. Today is February 9, 2022. It's 2 p.m. and all the board members are present.
Actually, I'm sorry to interrupt, Executive. I did omit Council Member Tyler Bird, who has not shown up yet.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe he will join soon. So, okay, thank you. Thank you for bringing that up. The first item on the agenda is confirmation of the minutes of September 8, 2021 meeting. If anybody has any comments, corrections, or changes, then I would need a motion to approve.
I'll move approval.
I'll move the minutes.
And second.
All right, so we have motion moved by Scott, and who was the second?
That was Rick, I think.
Okay, Rick. Okay, anybody who has any corrections or objections to that?
Said Paul, I will be abstaining on the vote.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Okay, hearing none, and this passes with unanimous except what do you call it?
Abstain.
Abstain.
Abstention.
Abstention by Michael Lilliquist. I think my brain is stuck somewhere. Thank you very much. And Mary Ann, we are all so eager to hear from you.
Okay, Mike, are you gonna put up the spreadsheet?
Yeah, is that up now? I'm sharing my screen at the moment. If you guys can see that.
Yeah.
Yes, it's up there. So this was done about a week or so ago. Obviously, our 2021 year end is not complete yet, and we'll still be undergoing adjustments for another month or so, but we're looking pretty close. So in the first blue column there, we have projected what the ending fund balance will be for 2021, somewhere around 22.3 million. And with the current budget for 2022 in the next blue column, we're expecting at this time to be ending 2022 with about 21.6 million. So right now, there's some potential accounts payable on the paramedic training class that are still not recorded. And we did not incur any cost on 5th unit implementation in 2021, but have a budget for 1,646,500 for 5th unit implementation at this time in 2022. I think we will still probably be needing to do a budget supplemental to add money for an ambulance order for the 5th unit implementation in 2022. Let's see, I think the paramedic training class that's listed for 2022 at 1,555,000. And the next line, the lateral training of 356,000. Some of the paramedic class training budget authority will move down to lateral training. We signed contracts or signing contracts with the City of Bellingham and Fire District 7 for up to 6 lateral trainees, which is going to be a bit more than that 356,000. But we only had 8 students participating in the paramedic training class, so that will drop the cost on the class. That's all I have to report. If anyone has any questions, let me know.
Mary Ann, this is Scott. Hey, I was just wondering in the future, because now we have a reserve policy, if you could put a line at the bottom that would show what our reserve policy would require based on the budget. I think it's 3/4 of the budget. And that way we would know if there's an
Sure.
excess amount or not.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Thanks, Miranda.
Miriam? Go ahead, please.
A quick one, if I might. Yep, thanks. Given that or I guess maybe the question would be, do you anticipate the revenue numbers for 2021? Looks like they're a little bit lower than the last projection. Do you think those are fair? I know everything's not finalized yet. And then if so, do we have a risk on the 2022 revenue numbers and some of the same line item sales tax, miscellaneous income, et cetera? Or too early to know?
Well, it's too early to know on 2022. The 2021 numbers I feel pretty good about. The 2022 numbers, that will remain to be seen. We could potentially get more on sales tax. And I really am not in a position to be able to project GEMT. That is, I get input from Forrest at the City of Bellingham and from Chief Hoffman at Fire District 7 on the GEMT numbers. And those were the numbers that they gave me.
It is interesting because it seems to reflect about a 5% drop. I wonder what accounts for that in the property tax.
In the property tax, a 5% drop, we're going from 8.4 million to 8.5 million. So I'm not sure.
Oh,
what-
okay. I'm looking at wrong. I'm looking at the 2021. It says 8.4, and then I'm seeing 21 plan. Okay,
That's
forgive
okay.
me. It drops projected plan budget. Got it.
I
Okay.
think just that terminology would be helpful. I've stumbled over that, I think, almost every other month, but if there's some way to say plan as of a date, that might help clarify what was like the levy, because I think those are levy plan, like that was the original levy plan.
Yes, it was the original levy plan.
Okay. Okay. Anybody else? All
I have
right.
a question.
Yes, please.
Yeah, so this is my first time on the board. This is kind of a beginner question, but I understand. So go back to that, the plan versus actual for 2021. The beginning reserves is like what, 8-9 million difference. How much of that is due to the medic unit not coming on board, and how much of it is due to other factors?
Michael, you want to put up the sheet again, please?
Sure. Everybody see that?
Yeah.
I mean, in other words, we've been underspending, and a lot of that is due to the fact that the extra medic unit hasn't rolled out yet. How much of that is due to that one factor?
I'd have to go back and take a look at the plan in the prior years and see how much was anticipated to be spent on the rollout of the 5th medic unit according to the plan. So that would take some research. I do know that we have a lot more fund balance, because if you look at that GEMT payment line item,
Mhm.
none of that was anticipated when the plan was done.
Okay, well, that probably explains half of it right there. It's like 6.5 million right there, something like that.
At least, I
Seven?
think we're 3.7, at least 7.5, I think.
Okay, so that's actually probably a larger factor than the deviation from the original plan. Started
Oh,
with
let me let me take that back. If I add up the 641, the 4 million, the 3.3 million, and the projected 2.9 million, it's going to be over 7 million. So what is that for? That's over 10 million, 11 million. I'd say it's about 11 million.
The fifth unit last year, I think by our original plan was $1 million last year that was not spent.
Yeah.
Order of magnitude.
Right. I'm just not sure if there was anything projected in 2020 for the fifth unit.
I think I have the rough order of magnitude idea, though, where most of that comes from. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Mary Ann.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. So the next item is Technical Advisory Board report, Mike Healy.
Yeah, thanks, Executive, and I'll get this document up just to share for a little bit as well. Just a little background. So we started some work with levy planning back in actually 2020, midsummer 2020. And as we began doing that work, part of that was identified in the previous plan to explore possibly some type of BLS allocation that could help out the BLS units for different types of things that needed in those BLS agencies to help them run a little bit better. Excuse me, I'll find that screen share real quick. Here you go. And during that process, during the levy planning process, also we realized that actually some of these healthy end fund balances might have led to an early distribution, primarily in 2022. So we got into discussion what that would look like over the period of the next levy as we're doing that planning. But inside that discussion, emerged more conversation about the possibility of having a 2022 basic life support allocation reimbursement for this year. And so as we went through those conversations, we identified some of the stresses that were on the fire departments, things that were, especially in the last 2 years with, between COVID and the floods and all the pandemic stuff, that these BLS organizations were struggling just a little bit. So out of that committee, and then significantly with Commissioner Rob Roy Graham, Division Chief Boyko out of Ferndale Fire District 7, and Jeremy Morton in my office and myself, worked to develop an allocation formula that would provide, an equitable distribution across the system if we determine that an allocation could be given to all the agencies. And so this is where you'll see in your spreadsheet this BLS funds allocation formula. And the formula, I'll pop this up, it may not pop up on here. The formula adjusted over there would allow, if you look on the spreadsheet, it actually has an adjustable column in there where you can plug in 1 million, 2 million, 3 million, and would spit out basically about how much allocation each department would get based on that adjustment. So the calculation uses 30% of the AV, 70% of the call volume, with some considerations for out of service times, also call volume, and then a couple other small factors which excluded community paramedicine calls, and of course all the advanced life support calls. And so the call volume that the allocations were based on were basically any call that a basic life support unit would go on as related to the EMS system. And so in that allocation budget worksheet, you can see based on whatever the allocation amount would be, that's the adjustment that each BLS agency would have in their local areas. So at our technical advisory board meeting in January, we brought this in discussion, and the technical advisory board passed a motion on to the EOB to recommend that the EOB provide a one-time allocation of 5.0 million from the EMS fund to support the cities and fire districts providing BLS services in Whatcom County. Each agency share would be determined by using the formula, the 30% assessed value and 7% BLS response load. And you can see in the supporting documents there, the budget, and there's a static table there that shows what each department would get if we distributed 5 million among them. And then below you'll see the fire department basic life support budgets across the region, with the exception of Fire District 5, who hasn't reported at this time. The Finance Committee also looked at this formula and talked a lot about it. And there was agreement in the finance group that this was an equitable formula to use, that this formula would be the basis for the allocation or the determination of the payouts. And all of this information comes out of our electronic patient care record system called Image Trend. So our source of truth for all of this would be the Image Trend data that would make those decisions, and those calculations are easily pulled out year to year based on the data for each agency. Then you'll see down below some data related to EMS call or BLS call volume between 20 and 21. We did have some data available for 2019. However, all the agencies were not on the system in January 1 of 2019. However, there's a good snapshot of what the increases were from 19 to 20. Bellingham is a good example of understanding the increases as they were actually fully invested in Image Trend in 2019. So also down here, just expressed in a different way, is the increase of call volume most significantly between 20 and 21. The first chart shows just all the basic life support call volume, i.e. these are all the calls that a BLS unit were sent on in those various districts. And then those particular increases from 20 to 21 percentage increases. And then down at the second one, you'll see the BLS transports. So these are actual transports that a BLS unit from each of the district took somebody to the hospital and back. So that's the information as far as understanding how the formula and the calculations are met. And I do want to say that it's pretty easy to see that between 20 and 21 across the board that BLS, not only BLS calls, but BLS transports, we're averaging about a 50% increase of call volume between those 2 years. And so there's been significant increases to the BLS system. And as we get into the conversation today, I'm sure you'll hear some of the fire chiefs talk about that. And actually, executive, I don't see Commissioner Rob Roy Graham on there, although I can't see the entire field. But I was going to ask him to talk a little bit about, from his perspective, as he was one of the persons that set up this or pioneered some of this work.
Sure.
However, I don't see him.
I'm here.
Oh, there you are. Sorry,
Mike, you don't
Commissioner.
see me.
I'll quick share here and I'll probably get the full picture. So I would invite you at the, if that's okay, executive, to have Commissioner Graham talk about it from his perspective.
Well, since I am speaking on behalf of all the commissioners in Whatcom County for the various agencies, I think it's unanimous among them that there needs to be some sort of external source of income to support the BLS system as it is. We're just not capable of performing. Well, I think everybody's gonna work to keep it working, but it's come down to the point that you really just have to have more funding because several reasons. I think the one that's the most obvious is the fact that they're just the tendency for civilians to volunteer is just dropping nationwide, and we're feeling it here also, that we just can't get people to volunteer to respond to these calls on a volunteer basis. So everybody is resorting to paying staff members to man the stations to respond to the calls. You know, I know out in the East County, we've looked at various ways to combat. I'm sorry about the phone's ringing. If just bear with me here, I don't know how to turn it off over there. So anyway, we've talked about various ways to continue what we're doing. Excuse me.
Good example of call volumes.
We've talked about different ways of doing it, trying to make the system, continue to make the system operate, but it always comes back to we need to have more people standing by the station, because Number one, I think if you guys had an opportunity to look at the letter from the chief from District 21, North Watcom, there's this thing called concurrent aid calls, and you have a call, your staff is gone, your ambulance is gone, and you need someone there to continue to stand by the station. And because there's not the number of volunteers responding that used to respond, the only way you have people standing by is to pay people to be there. So it's come down to just staffing these stations, these volunteer stations. And without it, I think the whole system is going to I don't know if it's going to suffer, because there aren't people out there that want to respond like they did 20, 15, 30 years ago. I would recommend that you read the letter from North Watcom's chief, and he explains his particular situation there, because he can't rely on surrounding mutual aid agencies, because he only has mutual aid agencies from two directions, and that's Linden and Ferndale, who both are buried in their calls themselves and can't spare people to come in and fill the void when his aid unit is responding. And that's there again, his request is for more funding to pay more staff. So I think it, without, over dwelling on the fact that we need the money, it comes down to the fact that you got to pay people to do what volunteers used to do, because they're not doing it. And that's.
Thanks, Mr. Graham. Mayor Fleetwood.
Just quickly, if you would, is there any prevailing theory as to what accounts for the drop in volunteerism?
Well, I think that anybody would, I was involved as a volunteer for 30 years, and I've seen people that regardless of what you were doing, you responded when that pager went off. The mindset now amongst the 20 and 30-year-old kids, we just talked at our station last night, and they had a fire call, a vehicle fire call. The people that were there were all over. The youngest person there was 57 years old. The young people just aren't coming out. They have friends for dinner, so they can't respond. It's my birthday, I can't respond. It's a mindset that we don't know how to deal with it, short of paying people to be present at the stations.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments, or anybody else would like to weigh on in this?
I think I would add that, this $5 million is a very generous offer. I think that everybody understands this is a one-time thing, but I also believe that one of the requirements that they would like to see in this new EMS levy is ongoing supplemental aid to BLS agencies, because it can't be something that we're going to get this money one time and that's going to fix everything, because it won't.
Yeah.
So.
Let me comment briefly on this. Is what you described is not a one-year problem. It is a systemic problem for next 10, 15 years. And I think that as responsible board people who are charged with to make these decisions, I think we should look at that. What is the real solution? Because years going to go by pretty quick. And we should pay attention to this serious issue, how we can work something which is good for 7, 10 years. At least levy comes up every 6 years. So we should really, I would like to welcome more discussion on this thing. And one thing, Mr. Graham, I totally agree, help is needed. I'm not really diminishing that part of it. Help is needed, but help is needed disproportionately at different places. It's not like a formula help, here's a formula, and let's just distribute the money that way. It's a where the need is, where the more help is needed, with the less help needed. We must consider that to make this decision. Thank you. Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, I guess I want to agree with a lot of what's been said. In Linden, we're having trouble getting volunteers. Now we're going to paid part-time, which helps, but we have full-time staff as well. But getting volunteers has been extremely difficult. And volunteers is really a misnomer. We pay them anyway. It's just a matter if you pay them a stipend or what. But and I would agree, BLS in the outer reaches of the county is more difficult to service because you have a lot of area and fewer people. So your tax base isn't as good as the cities or and other places in the county. So I guess what I would like, because 5 million is a lot of money. I know that we want to get it out there as soon as possible, but I guess I would challenge the tab to come back to us and each entity that's going to get the money, tell us how are you going to use it, and then once you're going to tell us if you had a reoccurring, just we'll pick a number, 2 million over this next levy. How would you apply that money over the next 6 years, and does it become sustainable at some point? Because I think that's what we're really looking for. Is we're looking for a sustainable solution for BLS in Whatcom County. What we have right now is kind of a hodgepodge of things. And I guess as we go into the levy season, we're going to need good, I want to show that we spent the money properly and judiciously in our county as we go to ask for more money and ask for possibly more millions per year to help BLS. Is that something the TAP can do, Rob Roy?
Well, I think my understanding of this is that it's an operations thing, and each chief is going to use the money. They know that it's going to be spent for BLS, and as far as how they're going to spend it, I think I have a list that I got from my chief, but it falls underneath the money that is allocated here on the graph for district basic life support budgets. But it's still, so you guys included more in that than apparently we did. But the fact is, it's still, our allotment is $330,000. We spend $749,000 a year on BLS. So what's to be done with it is going to be determined by each chief. And I guess I've heard this, Scott, so many times that we're going to do this. TAB has already agreed to do this, and now you're asking TAB to go back and do more. And it's like, it's got to be resolved. This money is here. You know, when we first started talking about it, the problem was we've got to get rid of this excess before we go to the people, because if we don't, they're going to go, why do we have so much left over? BLS, with the needs that are expressed here and all this paperwork, are obviously, they're not going to go out and just spend it wantonly, man. They have dire need for this money.
Rick, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. You know, there's something that we need to really look at that I believe was talked about either at the last or previous meeting, or maybe it was last year when we had the initial discussion of the power cuts as an example. Sort of how things all tie together, and everybody has a great conversation on this, but we all need to remember that the excess monies that we're dealing with that fall into the category of the GEMT, it's a capitated time frame, and it doesn't mean it's not going to continue, but right now it's at a capitated time frame, so there will be an end to that program unless it's extended by the legislature. So based upon that, utilization of the funds really needs to be considered on the best way to do that. There's one item that hasn't been discussed yet, and I really think needs to be considered. And I brought this up when the power cuts were brought into service. I really think before we start spending a whole lot of money, that you should go back to all of those districts in the county that got the power cuts, that have them stuck back in the corner with their fire halls, get those units installed in their units, put the power loads in every single one of those ambulances or aid vehicles that have those power cuts, and get those things on the road so they can be utilized. First of all, that's how that should be funded. Now, as far as the rest of the monies, you know, the $5 million going out to the districts, yeah, there's a huge need for the BLS funding. But again, I don't want to rain on anybody's parade here, but you need to remember that there is a capitated time frame on these GEMT monies, and it would be probably not in the best interest to have people utilize that money for payrolls because it may end. I would hate to have you hire people for a 2 or 3 year period and then have to let them go or try to go back to the voters to get more money on a program that wasn't funded properly. So I just want to give that caution. But again, circling back, it's going to close the loop on something we've already discussed. Fund those programs for the county districts that need to have those power loads put in their ambulances, and do it now. Don't wait 6 months or 8 months or a year to get this taken care of. You've already spent the money on the power cuts. Get them in service.
Thank you, Rick. And Michael Lilliquist? Michael, you're muted.
Oh, sorry. Another newbie question, following on what Rick just said. What is the current expiration on the GEMT funds? When do they expire if they're not extended?
Was that a question to me?
Or whoever knows the answer.
Well, I believe initially that was put on as a 5-year program. I don't know when the exact start date was, nor do I know when the end date is. All I know is it creates a lot of income. And again, if you don't utilize that income, then you're going to end up, you know, that's going to be a problem also. And that's why I suggest moving forward on doing these things. I think the $5 million to the BLS district, to the districts for BLS, is an excellent idea. Isn't going to solve all the problems? Well, heck, no, it's not. But, you know, the money has to be utilized. And I think there's 2 different areas that it should be utilized. Again, get those power cuts in service, fund the BLS programs, and then move on from there.
Okay, we have a chat in the chat. Rob Rush wrote that agree with Rick, get the capital equipment issues fixed first, and then let's get a sustained funding source for personnel. Go ahead, Mayor Fleetwood, please.
Was a recommendation provided to us with a proposed motion for consideration?
Well, yes. So the motion from the tab up to the EOB was to recommend a 5.0 million allocation to BLS using the agreed allocation formula that the Finance Committee approved. And that was the motion.
And do I understand there was consideration of either amending that motion or as a separate motion to get policy direction from this board to ensure by some means that the next levy will include some dedicated portion for sustainable BLS?
That's correct. That's correct. I made that, and that was not just myself. That was the chiefs, again, speaking up, the commissioners and the chiefs wanting to get some sort of long-range subsidies from the EMS levy to support BLS specifically.
So has anyone done the financial analysis to ensure that there's anticipated to be in the next levy, which I understand is this year, to continue supporting ALS and also have sufficient funds for a BLS component?
I think that is a task that we do need in front of this board. with the real clarity. And because I'm not really clear about, I looked at the documents, I'm sorry, it could be just me, but this did not provide me clarity. What will happen a year from now, 2 years from now. We need to fix this problem, and we need to support BLS in our rural areas. It goes without saying, but now this the capital equipment thing has come up, and that also need to be looked at. And yeah, Michael. Okay, first Mr. Lilliquist, and then Michael Healy. Michael.
Am I okay? Sorry. Another newbie question. So if we're talking about adding a BLS component to the renewal of the EMS levy, it was called a subsidy. Are we talking something that would cover 10%, 20%, 90% of BLS costs? What degree of supplemental BLS support has been talked about?
I don't think we know that, Michael, but that is the question. We need to address that before, I mean, that is the levy planning part of it. I would assume that. Mr. Healy, you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, thanks. And to answer Mayor Fleetwood's question as well. So there were two pieces in this. And actually, as I mentioned earlier, this all conversation started inside the levy planning process. And so for the new levy, the conversations are exactly how we could provide a recommended allocation that would serve over that 6 year. But inside that conversation, we realized with the healthy in-fund balance that there would be potential for a similar payout for 22, sort of as a base payout. And then the work of the levy committee right now is to determine what that would look like in the new levy plan. And so two pieces on that. And regards to the GEMT, so a couple of things. The GMT, we started receiving funds on that, I believe it was mid-2018 when all that work was done. The monies came in sort of spurts because of the way the program was set up initially. There were some large retro payments from when that work was done. But once all that settled out, we were kind of getting a little more comfortable and actually in projecting out what that might be from year to year based on the information we were getting from Bellingham and FD7 as they received those monies in. But there's still a little bit of trepidation about projecting a budget on those revenues, as Mr. Kowski mentions, that's somewhat ambiguous to the stability of the fund over the long term. I did talk to the Healthcare Authority as well as a company called PCG Consultants who did the original work. And they do feel like the fund is stabilized out at least up to the next 10 years. But Rick is correct in that there's a lot of conversations going on with the Healthcare Authority about that capitated budget. And those amounts could change as more people from not only the Healthcare Authority, but the Centers for Medicaid Services may want a larger chunk of that money. So we've been reluctant to base a program or revenue or projections on those revenues. But once that money was in the fund, then felt that was a good place to spend. So that's why we haven't really projected anything out into the levy of what the GEMT fund specifically would support, as opposed to going to the in-fund balances for monies that we knew were going to be in there.
Okay, Mr. Walker.
Thank you, Executive CJ. I wanted to echo, I think, your comment and others earlier, figuring out a sustainable path for this makes a huge amount of sense and really needs to be front of our minds. One of the things that I've been worried about is if we do try and add on a bunch of more services to the levy, I think that potentially pushes the rate up. So it's not a simple renewal, but it's sort of you actually have to ask for a new levy, which then has, I think, a higher voter requirement, a higher approval requirement. So that's one of the things I've been thinking about, how much bigger is it going to be and does it trigger that or not? Or are we still within the original 29.5 cents? So I have no idea where we're landing right now with the planning, but that's something that I'm worried about, given I think our last levy we passed by 40 votes or something. It was pretty close. So that's something that I've been worried about. The other piece that I think would be good to do in parallel is some discussion or articulation of cost saving measures that we've taken, and I'm not suggesting we do a full blown review or anything, but I think it's nice to have some powerful anecdotes on, yes, we're asking for more money, but here's also some things that we've done. And I know everyone is bent over backwards to figure out how to operate in this environment. So hopefully that's not hard to come up with, but I think that would be good to have as part of the story. The other piece that jumped out to me is with the state bill, I think it was 1310. Have we seen a drop in calls on the public safety side, and have we seen any cost savings there? Right? How does that play into the story? And not expecting anyone here to answer that today, but that's something to me as a voter that comes out, right? Like, totally understood. All these calls have shifted over to the EMS side, but have we had an offset on the public safety side or not? And how do we complete that picture if we're describing that as one of the impetuses for this call growth? So. Yeah, a couple of things I had.
Scott?
Thanks.
Scott?
I asked partly to answer Mr. Walker's question. The levy today is at 22 cents. I just looked it up. And so 29, and we could go to 29.5 without, and I think there's significant capacity between 22 and 29.5 cents. But that's a real question that we have to answer. That'll be a significant tax increase for all of our people to pay that. And is that palatable at some point? I mean, we can go out with the same number, but it's going to be more money out of their pockets because it's going to be in the high 20 or 21 cent range this year, because every year it drops a bit. Anyway, that's just the way the property tax works. But going from 21 cents to 29.5 cents, that's a significant increase. So we have to balance all of these things. And to answer another question somebody had, well, I heard Rob Roy say earlier that, we could get 350,000 from this $500,000 or $5 million deal, that he would get 350. And that's probably half of his operating budget. And that's with 5 million extra. I don't think we're thinking that this is sustainable at 5 million forever. If it were 2 million, we're talking 20% of his budget maybe. And so, and just thinking about my budget, it's probably in that 20% range. So, there's a lot of other funding sources that have to come in to fund BLS. But I guess the question I have is some number like 2 million enough to make it sustainable, that it keeps going? That's the question, I guess. Or what is that number that makes it sustainable? And that's where we need some help from the people that need the money, how much they need, and then how much that affects the taxes. And I think we should review that.
I just want to add to what Scott said. I think that this is a good exercise. I know that sometimes there's a frustration. Give me the money. I know what the best way to use it. I do that a lot of times to the state people. Just give us the money. Don't ask me any questions. No, I was just like a general comment, but I think that that the thing is that I'm more concerned about beyond 5 million, not this 5 million. I think that the thing is, if we say and pick a number, and you guys are at it for a long time. I'm newbie, Michael Lilliquist. I'm still newbie after 2 years, so don't feel bad about this. This is a very complex system. This is not only the levy that we tax people with. There's a fire district tax, there's the 911 tax, there's a lot of other taxes. They all get combined and shifted and spent. So, but we should. I would like to say that that the TAB can look at, okay, this is 5 million, and if we put X millions a year for next 6 years, we get 15, 17, 18 $million to support BLS. I think that's where we should go, and then we have a plan for that how we sustain BLS, and then we look at where the money will come from. And I agree that 22 cents, whatever we have levy now, just to increase the levy, it's not the answer. I mean, that's the responsibility we've been given. Manage the tax dollars in the best possible manner. Not that's increasing the tax is not the only option we have.
You know,
Go
and
ahead, Rick.
thank you. I appreciate that. You know, it's just sort of a point of order. I know that we're kind of getting all over the board here from the discussion phase on the levy and on the allocation. You know, if it counts for anything, and just to get the ball rolling, I would like to make a motion that we fund that $5 million BLS support, and along with that, fund the striker power load, not only for the counties that have not installed it, but also to reimburse the agencies that have installed it, to get that off the table, to get it moved, to get safe operations for those county districts, so they're all using the same product across the board. That is the motion I have.
I'll second that motion, Rick.
I'll second.
Okay.
This is right.
Okay, if I may have a suggestion on this motion, that why don't we take ourselves 30 days and give it to the tab, that they should, we can have another meeting. I mean, that's not a big deal, and come up with a little more information, as well as from the fire districts and for the levy planning perspective, at least come up with something that, okay, this is how we can sustain it. That would be my suggestion. I'm not against giving the money, but I'm saying that there need to be a little more deliberations before we go ahead with this. And who will get the money? Is it a formula money? Like I haven't even looked at it. And I'll be very frank that if we giving the same money to say City of Bellingham and City of Linden, and compared to the fire districts, the needs are different and the capacities are different. And we must take that into account before we distribute the $5 million, where the need is the most, and how we fulfill that need. Otherwise, it may not be equitable from the service and what we are trying to achieve. Go ahead, Rob. Mr. Rush, you have a
I
hand
think
up.
Michael was first. He had his hand
Okay,
up.
Mike. Okay, Michael.
You're on mute.
Michael, you're
You're
still
mute, Michael.
You missed it. I said something brilliant and now I forgot it. Let me try to understand the motion. The $5 million, this is the one-time distribution we talked about based on the formula that was presented earlier in the meeting. Yes. And then two, I didn't understand the second part of the motion, which had to do with some technology, strikers, something. I don't know what that part is.
If I may clarify, I'll be happy to do that. When we originally made the plan to purchase the striker power cots for all of the Whatcom County, I made the suggestion that it's kind of like buying the peanut butter, but not buying the jam. You can operate one without the other, but it's not sensible to do that because of the additional load it puts on the crews. They should have been done at the same time, but they weren't. But we have an opportunity, because we have some funds that are available, to finish that project that was started almost 2 years ago and get that done, get everything operational. And Mr. Lilliquist, what it is there's a system in the back of an ambulance that loads those stretchers rather than having to lift those on their own, because the power stretchers are 78 pounds heavier than a standard striker stretcher. And it's proven on a national and international basis that it reduces back injuries. It reduces the need for additional staffing to load those cots and unload those cots. And it's a no-brainer. It really needs to be done.
Okay, Rick. So when you say cots, I think gurneys and these power gurneys have their own power for kind of a power assist.
That's correct.
And this is the additional expenditure for the loading system that goes with those.
That's correct.
I understand
And they
the
really are designed to go hand in hand.
Thank you. I understand the motion.
Go ahead, Mr. Rush.
Yes, sir. Thank you. And I was just going to say that I'm in agreement with what Rick said, is that you have to have a safe system first. And I was part of the decision making on, or most of us here were. Michael's new here, but I had to assume that that was already functioning and in place, and everybody had it at this point. So it kind of is interesting to me that it hadn't been put in all of the systems yet. For those upgrades, because those are those are also safer for the patients as well, so that they're not falling off and everything. So that's an important part, and I just wanted to emphasize that.
And again, the only reason I say they should go hand in hand is because the districts should not have to use that funding they're going to receive from the $5 million distribution to do part of this final install. They should be together. They should be done considered as separate, but done together. Again, that's part of why I made the motion the way I did.
The one other thing I'd like to express is that I'm agreeing with the executive on this, because not all of these districts are the same. I agree, there are differences between them. Some are population based, but that's not the only thing. I mean, when you go camping, you have to have a certain amount of stuff that's available to you, no matter how long you're going to be there. And so there has to be a set amount of stuff for anything that they do. And then beyond that, it's somewhat for the supplies and things and personnel, it's in addition to that. So there may be some differences there between each of the districts. I don't know. That would be up to the tab. Thanks.
Scott?
Yes, a couple of comments. First, maybe Rick, just so we know, the cost to install one of the striker catcher equipment in a particular ambulance is roughly.
You had to ask that question. I think that Mike may have that answer. Mike, do you have that? Mike Ellie, do you have that answer?
Yeah, and sorry not to jump in front of you, Hall. I wanted to give a little background on that program in particular. So the load unit itself, this is the unit that is actually permanently mounted in the back of the medic unit or BLS unit. It has an arm that extends out, it grabs that gurney, picks it up off and automatically loads it in. That piece of equipment is about $25,000 per unit, and that would be installed. We started this program back in, and that would be for 56 ambulances in the system, by the way, times 25,000. So when we got into the program a couple of years ago, we were actually got a great offer for was a 10-year annualized or a 10-year lease program on all those gurneys, as well as some equipment from Stryker. And doing that way, it was about $540,000 annual payment over that 10-year period, which included all that equipment. So that was some 56 gurneys, that was a life packs, that was stair chairs for the medic units, and some other equipment that went into that purchase program. So during those processes, the fire chiefs working through those committees at the time decided that the power loads were probably just going to be too expensive at the time to present to council for that, which would have essentially doubled that 10-year amount, and it'd probably be close to more of $1 million per year in an annualized payment for doing all that. So the BLS agencies at the time agreed to go ahead and try to fund that on their own through various ways. However, obviously it's an expensive piece of equipment, and we do agree. So I would maybe make a suggestion, is that if we maybe untangle the Stryker load from the original motion, that could be a separate motion if the EOB wants to go ahead and approve that additional load system for the ambulances. And that would be pretty easy process to add, 54 of those load systems into the current contract at this time and put it into that annualized payment. And then that would be a great way to move forward just on that little piece. And like I said, that would increase that annualized payment to a little bit over 1.2 million per year to add those 56 load systems.
Scott, you want to complete your thought?
Yeah, so that is 1.4 million, which is a lot of money. So the second part of the question is, of course, I would gladly take the roughly 400,000 that the 5 million allocation sends to Linden. But I'm running a basic life service that's generally fully funded at the moment, though I'm seeing lots of call volume, so I'm going to need more people in the future. But I guess I'm going to put Mayor Fleetwood on the spot a little bit, maybe, but you're going to get over 2 million. And if we refund your striker loaders, you're going to get another significant hunk of cash. How do you plan? Do you have a plan to how to spend that kind of money on BLS? Because you're the biggest getter of the money.
Right.
So I'm going to put you on.
I get it. I mean, it's a fair question. I mean, the immediate observation is that there's an equitable formula. So to that degree, calling out one particular jurisdiction doesn't really make the point. It's an equitable distribution, and the same phenomena exists for everyone, pretty much. So we are getting 1.8 million. I need Bill to speak to it in more detail. I know 300,000, I think, was related to a device on gurneys that's not funded. Bill, you there?
Yeah, I'll be happy to jump in there. You know, we've been hit hard by COVID, obviously, and that's had a huge unanticipated increase in our overtime costs to keep people in the seats, to keep providing units out there. So that's honestly, that's where a big portion for us is going to go to help pay offset overages and staffing due to COVID related issues that have been going on. And then the other big one that's hit all of us too is fuel prices have been significantly higher than what we're budgeted for initially. And so we've got, you know, I can tell you at the end of 2021, I've got 3 million things that 3 million places that money could go. And fortunately, it's only about 1.8 to fill those holes in costs that ran over that are related to our providing basic life support. So this one-time infusion of funds, knowing what it is, you know, or knowing that it is that one-time infusion, you know, yeah, we've got plenty of unanticipated costs that we're going to be able to use to help continue to support the system.
And this pivots way back to my comment way earlier. And these are good things to spend the money on. I just would have liked to seen from every department a list of what we're going to spend the money on. So when the taxpayers ask us, we know, well, yeah, it went to all these great things. But you know, that's all I was asking for earlier, because we are responsible to the citizens and to the taxpayers.
May I jump in?
Yes, go ahead, please.
That's a fair thing to request, Scott. I guess the reason I'm having a just a little bit of pushback on it is simply because I'm operating under the assumption that all the various districts, beneficiaries of this money, have done that. So maybe we're not aware of the particular intents for how it would be spent, but I'm operating under the assumption, and I think there's a general representation that that has happened. So it's an interesting, I don't know, go ahead, Scott.
Well, I see Mel on, I guess, can you comment on your fire department? I mean, have you figured out how you're going to use the money?
Yeah, I mean, there's, you know, just like Chief Hewitt said, there's a lot of unplanned expenses. We are definitely shorthanded. We've looked at that, and granted, there may not be, this may not be the most stable funding to hire people with, but at the end of the day, we also can't sit here scared to spend this money and not be willing to hire people. We may have to take that risk. And if this funding does go away, that may mean that we have to prolong some capital improvements and things. And I'm speaking just for District 1 right now, and not on behalf of the chiefs, but certainly there are enough expenses that this one expense is going to be a shot in the arm to help us get over the hump. You know, I looked at what you know, we spend as a a combination department, and we're looking at hiring 2 more people, but even without those 2 people, we're looking at spending, $1.2 million for BLS, and that's all being funded out of our fire levies. Primarily, we about 240,000 in revenue from BLS transports and our own GEMT. But so, what we're getting for EMS support right now is a little over 10% of what we're spending. And so having that additional funding would be huge for us. I would caution a little bit. You never want to turn down money when somebody wants to hand you money. You never want to say no. And I would like to just speak really briefly to a couple of comments that were made. And I'm going to speak on behalf of the fire chiefs right now. Put that hat on. We understand, the fire chiefs understand that ALS is the first priority with this funding, and that is our goal, is to make sure that ALS is fully funded. But we also would like to see some support, whatever this levy has. We would like to see some BLS support out of it as well. And we understand that even in the future, in the next levy, that may change. If there is a shift in funding, that the BLS may have to pay the price and be sacrificed with that, because we need to continue to support the ALS. And we support that ALS is our number one priority. When we start talking about buying load systems, I'll talk a little bit, kind of follow up on what Mike said. We run into some issues. We start painting with a really broad brush, and the load systems would be great. And a lot of it, most agencies have purchased those already. They found the funding to pay for those. But then that means that they don't have dollars for other things. So the money that we would get from that 5 million would support that. But when you start painting with a broad brush, I know there's several departments out there, and District 1 happens to be one of those. But some of our rigs are old enough that we can't just put a power load system in there. So if you buy it, then that means that I now have to go spend another $10,000 to $15,000 to pull the box off to do structural upgrades to aid unit that may come out of service in the next 3 to 5 years. I don't think that's a good investment for tax dollars to spend you're looking at $30,000 to $40,000 on a unit that's probably going to get sold at auction for $5,000. So that's where I trust the fire chiefs, and I hope that you guys do as well, that giving them this money, they're smart people, every one of them, and they're going to put that money where it's most needed. We have elected officials, we have processes to oversee that those dollars are spent wisely. We have the same obligation as everybody else. So Mayor Cordice first mentioned about knowing where those dollars were going to go. If I have to admit, I was taken back a little bit at first that my thought was, I don't need to be questioned. I have a board of commissioners that I answer to, and they will spend those dollars wisely. But you said something that really hit home, and I appreciated your comment, and I'm glad that you clarified that, because it would be nice to have something to go to the voters as here's what we did, and I very much appreciate that, and I agree with that comment, to have a list of here's the good stuff that we've done as we go forth with this levy in the future.
If I add to what Mel just said, why it has to be a distribution? I'm just really questioning this thing, and I may be naive about it. We have $5 million. We should, why it has to be a distribution and use the formula? Why don't we put the money where it is needed? Like Mel said, nobody will refuse the money. We will find ways to use that money. It's no problem with that. So when this came to me, I just want to share, but my thought was, it came to me was that BLS really needs support in the rural county, because their levies have failed, or the caps have failed or something else has happened and there's a dire need. And those citizens also need a service as at least some reasonable service as a citizen in Bellingham or Ferndale or Linden would expect. So we should invest money where it is needed rather than saying, oh, there's a formula and we will all get money. So go ahead, Rick, you had your hand up.
Yes, I'm sorry. And Chief Blankers, I respectfully object to what you said. I want to clarify something in regard to the power load systems. They can be retrofitted into ambulances that go back many, many years. There's no trouble on the installation. And you can take that power load system. If you decide to take a unit out of service, it's $1,500 to pull it out of that unit and put it into another unit. So it's like changing shoes, basically. So you only have to buy it one time. Now, if you buy a brand new unit with a power load in there, well, then you have a power load system that you're going to have extra. So that's first and foremost. And again, I don't mean any disrespect. I'm just saying that that's the realities of how these things work. They are a cassette system virtually that you can take from one ambulance and have it installed in another. So it's not a problem. The only time you have an issue with that is if you have a wreck with your unit. You cannot reinstall that in another ambulance because it loses its certification. But I don't work for Stryker, don't misunderstand this. I'm just trying to make sure that we're closing the loop on something we've already done. And a lot of these discussions we're having are sort of going back to the levy and then back to the motion at hand. There's a motion in a second, and I would like to see us vote on that.
Okay. Any other comments? Go ahead, Bill, and then Michael.
Yeah, Executive, I'd just like to, on your question about your, desire to want to see the money go where it needs. I can tell you, and I'll go out on a limb here for all the fire chiefs that are on this, as the ones who provide the EMS service, with the exception of Mayor Courthouse, or possibly with the exception of the city of Linden, there is not one fire chief here that will tell you we do not have needs for this money. We spend a lot of time as a group, the fire commissioners or the elected officials who oversee the fire districts in your county, spend a lot of time talking about finding a way that would best allocate the money to the areas that needed it the most. And that's why we didn't go off of a straight assessed value or a straight call volume. We went and we looked at really how do we best allocate that out. We've spent a lot of time going round and round looking at multiple formulas. The professionals who are providing this service for your county have done that work for you. That is what went into putting this allocation formula together before the technical advisory board also looked at it and reviewed it. So I would say that work is done. As far as, do you want to see 14 fire districts get into an arm wrestling match over whose needs are more important than the other ones? I don't know that that's really fair to ask us to do. All of our needs are very important. All of us have shown that we are spending millions of dollars on BLS and ALS first response is part of that BLS. We need the support. And this is, we worked very hard to find a fair and equitable way to put that out there. So.
Yeah, I respect that, Bill. I think that this is not the intent, or at least I can speak for myself. This is not my intent that this is not needed. But whenever, if you have $20 and your need is $50, you would prioritize where I'm going to put my money in. That's where I'm going with this. I'm not saying that, oh, you don't need it or you won't find a reasonable way to spend it. You will find a reasonable way to use that money. And another thing is what is the the capacity behind. The house in Kendall is $250,000, where a house in Bellingham is $600,000. And they can't stand that they can put their levy to $5 a mill rate or whatever the way we decide, compared to Bellingham can get away with $1.50. I mean, we are all citizens. We are all depend on these dollars. How do we collect that dollars and how we meet that? Or we say, hey, you know, it's like school districts. You live in a poor district, you get a poor school district. You live in a rich district, you get a rich school district. Is that fair? It doesn't mean that those schools don't have good utilization of the money. That's the money they have and they utilized as well. So that's where I was going with that. So I just wanted to clarify that. I'm not saying that, okay. Anyways, any other comments, Scott?
Well, I want to answer Chief Hewitt that Linden can use the money just like anybody else for the fire department. But when you say, I have the same costs, I have high overtime because COVID. I have a whole bunch of other expenses that have gone up. But the reality is I paid them all. and so for me to say, well, this year I'm not going to pay my overtime. Of course I'm going to pay my overtime. It's in my budget. So if I get the money, are there new things I'm going to add this year? I could. But I could use it on the same things you talked about. I'm going to use it on overtime. I'm going to use it on training. I'm going to use it on this, that. But those things are probably already in your budget and in my budget. So I would be careful to say that, you know, now if I think somebody in Bellingham Fire Department said that you guys need another BLS unit, well, that's okay. Then there's clear use for new funds. And I know in Linden that as my call volume now is going up, that I'm going to need more people, 2 more people on each of my shifts to cover the extra load so I can put a 3rd unit on the street. Those are clearly things I can use the money for, but I just don't want us. It's going to be easy to just supplant the general fund for people like Mayor Fleetwood and myself. Michael Lillquist, I'll turn it over to you.
I didn't see that.
Sure, I'll make this short and sweet. I am prepared to support the motion, both parts today.
Second.
I'm also prepared to support the motion as presented.
Only thing is, Michael, the second part is not defined well yet. It's just a number thrown at it. I don't think.
Well, I heard the
been...
motion as the $5 million according to the formula, and then paying for completion of installation of the power loaders for all the powered gurneys. That's how I heard the motion.
Okay.
Just point of order, if I could.
Yes, please.
Unless I'm mistaken, I heard Mr. Lillquist restate the motion. I thought that the motion was already made and seconded. Yes. Is that correct? Okay.
I call the question.
So the second part of the motion would be just like, okay, fund the loader cells or whatever that equipment is, but there's no number on it.
Well, I heard a number of, there's 56 units out there at 25,000 unit. That's 1.4 million. So it's going to be in that neighborhood. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong on that. And I understand that if it's already installed by the various fire departments, are going to get reimbursed for their installation cost is the way the motion was made.
That's
yeah,
correct.
I just was looking for that kind of clarity.
And Michael Healy, you said 56. Is that a good number?
Yes, that is a good number. That was a recent inventory conducted actually 3 weeks ago by Ben Boyko over to Fire District 7. So that's 56 BLS gurneys that would need 56 load units to go with them.
And the load units didn't come with the original gurneys. That was a separate purchase for everybody.
Correct, with the exception of the medic units. Now, we did buy the load system for the medic units as part of that larger bundle at the first part of the project.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, Mel, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I would just like to clarify and have us include my understanding from Stryker and Chief Mailing, I see you're on there and maybe you can clarify, but the older units from Braun do not support the Stryker power load, and that's where the structural modifications come in. Mr. Kowski is correct that yes, those can be moved from unit to unit, but there is so the older units like we've got, some of those were built back in the 90s. And back then they were not built to support those power loads. So if we're going to put a power load in there, then I think the system should pay for those upgrades to the unit as well.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I think everybody had their say, so let's vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Okay, anybody opposed? Scott and
Yeah,
myself.
I'm going to say I would like to see more information, and maybe we could have everybody that's going to spend the money give us a report on how it was spent so that we can have a report to the taxpayers, which I think is critically important. But I'll vote no just for that reason.
Yeah, I want to abstain for the same reason. I'm not really against this money. Like 5 million of things is not a whole lot of money to save BLS or put it in a firm footing. And I'm more like that if we have a program for next 7 years, that how much we will allocate and how it and need from each person, each department, that this is what our needs are going to be 5-6 years. Right now, there's immediate need, and we are saying, okay, we have the money. Okay, let's take that money and then we will worry about it later. That's what is not sitting well with me. So I'm going to abstain. Okay, so the motion passes. Mike Healy, you have the numbers.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't count. It was
a
2 people abstaining. I'm sorry, Mayor Curtius voting no, Sat Paul abstaining, and the rest of the group voting yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that'd be 6 yes, and then 2 nay.
Thank you very much.
A nay or an abstain.
Okay, so yeah. So let me just see what is the next item on our agenda. Okay, levy planning update, Michael.
Yeah, thank you, Executive. In interest of time, I was just going to give a super high level report, and actually, obviously from the outputs of this meeting, it'll give us better direction to provide some more recommendations for the BLS allocation into 22 through 29 levy. So that's good direction there. So where we are with levy planning is that we have a good bit of that plan in draft form. In fact, our finance group had a great work session here a couple of weeks ago where we'll get that section finalized and put input there. Also in the draft plan, we've got a little bit more work to do on the ALS BLS committee. However, all of the recommendations have been recorded in the documents. We're going to go back and refine some of those recommendations after our work session next week. And then I plan to get the larger levy planning parent group together here in the next 3 weeks to go over those and approve recommendations, etc. I had a target date of getting a first draft to the EOB at the March 9th meeting for a good first look. I can imagine there will be some more work after that just to get some of that language refined. But I feel like we're fairly close after a couple more work sessions. Then we may have to have a special EOB session just to talk about the plan by itself. I can imagine that would be a couple hours to go through that plan, observe all the recommendations, and move forward what the levy planning committee would be, recommending to the EOB at approval of that plan. So once we get that plan approved, Obviously, assuming county council would need to vet that plan and then move forward for putting this on the ballot in the November election. So we got a little bit more work to do. Feel a little bit of urgency to get some of this stuff done in the next 3 weeks. And after today's meeting, this will be a little more clarity for a couple of sections of that plan to move forward. But other than that, that's what I've got about right now on the planning. We'll get in some heavy meetings here in the next couple of 3 weeks just to move all this along.
Okay. Any questions for Michael or on this levy planning or suggestions?
I would just like to say to the mayor of Linden that I will work diligently to get all these chiefs to put you some packages together, Scott, so that you can see what they're going to do with this, and hopefully that will relieve some of your pressure from not supporting this. But I think we can certainly get that together and have something in writing for the next meeting, wherever it might be, whichever one it might be. We'll get the chiefs to put those on paper.
And if you'd have said that prior to the motion to call the question, if we'd have had that clarified, I probably would have voted yes. But anyway, I just think we owe it to our taxpayers to give them an outline of what we're doing.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Graham, and thank you, Scott. I think these are I think that is part of our bigger responsibility when we sit here. We are not the people who actually sit in the ambulance or go through that process, but still there's a lot of responsibility falls on our shoulders. How do we use that money, where we use it, where it is needed? So anything else for good of the order? Michael.
Yeah, executive, I just wanted to add one more comment to Mayor Cortias's and actually to the group. So I'll have to work with finance. One of the issues about those payments or reimbursements, if you will, is that obviously the districts and the departments will need to invoice the county in some fashion for those reimbursements to be paid out. And to Commissioner Graham's point, there has to be some sort of description on those invoices of obviously what that money is going through. So I'll work with finance on what that looks like, but that may be 13 different or 15 different ILAs. Not sure if we could do that in one single swoop ILA for the entire county. I'll just have to figure out what's in process on that. But obviously to exchange that large amount of money, we've got to have invoices as well as agreements moving across the organizations to make those payments. So I just want to let all the organizations know that there will be some paperwork to submit. And I once again think that what Commissioner Graham is suggesting would be very helpful for understanding what might go in those invoices in a high level way to make those transactions.
There's always paperwork.
Yes, there is.
I guess Michael brings up a good point. Does our action, is this a recommendation to the county council or is our action final?
It's a recommendation.
Okay, it is a recommendation to the county council.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have to go through this whole process once again.
Okay. It occurred to me that maybe this isn't a done deal. All right.
Oh, yeah, it's a good point, Mayor, because we'll have to write up and get this onto the council agenda. It takes several weeks to get ahead of the council agenda to get that on, and I'll have to do some preparatory work to get that moving on. But we'll get this scheduled on the next appropriate council meeting to move forward as well. For both topics, so that's going to be 1.4 million per year over the next 10 years of that capital. So yeah, we're looking at another $10+ million that would be added on that lease that the county would have to approve over that time frame, along with the $5 million reimbursement for 22. So two separate agenda items, and we'll have to prepare to move that through the council, through the finance committee.
And here I was getting on the back of this envelope an invoice for you already. So
Michael, one clarification: $1.4 million every year, like these loading units are. Or that's something different.
It should be one-time cost, 1.4 million.
Well, they're not one-time cost.
Just one-time cost.
Well, you're right. Actually, Mayor, you're right. It'd be a one-time cost spread along that 10-year contract. Absolutely. So I misrepresented that. So 1.4 million. However, per year, it's going to increase that annually by X amount. So yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate your time and till we meet next time. Thank you. We are adjourned.